Not all danger reveals itself through violence or hostility. Some of it speaks softly, smiles gently, and hides in the places we trust the most. Human history has repeatedly shown that danger does not always announce itself with aggression or hostility. More often, it appears disguised as warmth, morality, or even wisdom. Philosophers and psychologists alike have long warned that the most destructive forces are rarely obvious at first glance. They integrate seamlessly into social structures, relationships, and belief systems. Carl Jung, one of the founding figures of analytical psychology, argued that the human psyche is not a unified whole, but a layered structure composed of both conscious awareness and unconscious material. Among these layers lies the shadow, the parts of the personality that are denied, suppressed, or left undeveloped. When unacknowledged, these aspects do not disappear. Instead, they manifest indirectly, often through behavior that appears contradictory or deceptive. Modern culture, particularly through digital media, often simplifies Jung's ideas into lists of toxic people or types to avoid. However, Jung's warning was far more subtle and profound. He did not speak about villains in obvious forms, but about individuals whose inner conflicts remain unresolved, leading them to unconsciously project their inner darkness onto others. These individuals may appear kind, spiritual, supportive, or intellectually superior. Yet beneath this surface lies psychological fragmentation. Their outward identity serves as a mask, protecting them from confronting their own unresolved inner material. Jung believed that such fragmentation, when left unintegrated, can become psychologically contagious, affecting those who come into close contact. Thus, the real danger Jung pointed toward was not merely external harm, but internal erosion. How prolonged exposure to unintegrated personalities can distort perception, drain emotional resources, and slowly weaken psychological autonomy. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Carl Jung. One of the most deceptive psychological patterns emerges when individuals identify excessively with virtue. Jung referred to this phenomenon as inflation, a state in which the ego aligns itself with an idealized self-image while disowning its darker aspects. In such cases, morality becomes not a lived discipline, but a performance. When the shadow is denied, it does not vanish. Instead, it is displaced. Individuals who believe themselves to be exceptionally moral, enlightened, or spiritually advanced often unconsciously project their denied impulses onto others. They see manipulation, selfishness, or immorality everywhere except within themselves. This mechanism creates a subtle but dangerous dynamic. The individual becomes convinced of their own righteousness while justifying controlling or harmful behavior for the greater good. Criticism is framed as guidance, domination is reframed as care, emotional manipulation is disguised as concern. Jung warned that this type of person is especially dangerous because they sincerely believe in their own virtue. Unlike overtly aggressive individuals, they do not experience inner conflict about their actions. Their conscience has been outsourced to an idealized self-image, making self-reflection nearly impossible. In relationships, such individuals often position themselves as mentors, saviors, or moral authorities. Over time, those around them may begin to doubt their own perceptions, feelings, and judgments, leading to psychological dependency rather than growth. True psychological maturity, Jung argued, does not come from denying darkness, but from integrating it. Only those who recognize their own capacity for harm can genuinely choose restraint and responsibility. People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls. Carl Jung. Projection is one of the most fundamental defense mechanisms of the human psyche. It occurs when individuals attribute their own unacceptable thoughts, feelings, or impulses to others. Jung believed projection to be unavoidable, but dangerous when unconscious. When projection operates unchecked, it becomes a tool of manipulation. Individuals burdened by unresolved inner conflicts may unconsciously provoke reactions in others, confirming their distorted inner narratives. This creates a closed psychological loop in which the individual never confronts themselves. Such people often thrive in emotionally close environments, friendships, romantic relationships, spiritual communities, or workplaces built on loyalty. Their behavior is rarely overtly abusive. Instead, it is gradual, subtle, and cumulative. Confusion replaces clarity. Emotional exhaustion replaces enthusiasm. Those affected often report a loss of energy, self-doubt, and a vague sense of unease. Jung described this phenomenon as psychic leakage, a slow draining of psychological vitality caused by prolonged exposure to unresolved inner chaos in others. Importantly, Jung did not frame this as a moral failing. He viewed it as a psychological condition rooted in fear of self-knowledge. The manipulator is not always conscious of their actions. Nevertheless, the effects remain real and damaging. The antidote Jung suggested is not suspicion of others, but awareness of oneself. The more conscious an individual becomes of their own projections, the less vulnerable they are to absorbing those of others. Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. Carl Jung. Contemporary self-help culture often promotes avoidance as a solution. Avoid toxic people, cut off negative energy, protect your space. While boundaries are psychologically necessary, Jung would argue that avoidance alone is insufficient, and sometimes counterproductive. The deeper issue is not merely who to avoid, but why certain personalities affect us so strongly. Jung emphasized that unresolved aspects of the self act as magnets. What disturbs, fascinates, or drains an individual often reflects unexamined material within their own psyche. Psychological integration involves recognizing both creative and destructive impulses as part of the human condition. This recognition does not excuse harmful behavior, but it prevents unconscious entanglement. Integrated individuals are less likely to become emotionally dependent, manipulated, or drained. Jung believed that maturity emerges from tension, not comfort. Facing ambiguity, contradiction, and inner darkness strengthens psychological resilience. Those who pursue only light, positivity, or purity often remain fragile beneath the surface. A psychologically grounded individual does not seek perfect people, but coherent ones. Those capable of self-reflection, accountability, and inner dialogue. Such individuals may still be flawed, but they are less likely to unconsciously harm others. In this sense, Jung's work was not a warning against people, but an invitation toward depth. The real task is not to categorize others, but to develop the inner strength required to relate without losing oneself. There is no coming to consciousness without pain. Carl Jung. In conclusion, Jung's insights offer a timeless reminder. The greatest psychological dangers are not always external threats, but internal blind spots. When individuals fail to confront their own shadows, they risk acting them out through others, often under the guise of virtue or concern. This understanding shifts responsibility back to the individual. Instead of obsessively identifying dangerous personalities, Jung encourages the cultivation of awareness, integration, and discernment. Psychological clarity becomes the true form of protection. For the modern viewer, especially in an age saturated with simplified psychological labels, Jung's message remains radical. It asks for patience instead of judgment, depth instead of certainty, and self-examination instead of moral superiority. Only through such awareness can relationships become spaces of mutual growth rather than unconscious harm. And only through integration can individuals truly protect their energy, not by fear, but by understanding. If this exploration resonated, and if you seek deeper, more thoughtful psychological and philosophical content grounded in real theory rather than surface-level trends, consider supporting this channel. Like the video if it added value, subscribe for future long-form analyses, and share your thoughts in the comments. Meaningful dialogue begins where shallow certainty ends. Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes. Carl Jung.